He has written a book that I feel speaks to me. The 1990s, to me, were my decade. It was the best. I think I'd argue may have been the best decade of my life. And part of the bestness was cinema. And finally, someone has come along with a book all about it. He's an entertainment industry expert. His name is Scott Ryan. How about it for him? The book, you saw it there, The Last Decade of Cinema. This is a nostalgic look at the vibrant landscape of 1990s cinema. 1990s cinema, Scott Ryan, thank you for your patience and for being here. It was informed by, remind us, by what and by what directors, what creative forces were part of the 1990s?
Well, in some ways, it's the decade of Quentin Tarantino. I feel like that's, I split the decade into AP and BP, which is after Pulp and before Pulp. Because I think Pulp Fiction truly changed all of cinema in a way that we haven't seen, in my opinion, another movie come along and really crack everything.
What happened in Pulp Fiction that you feel was so transformative?
Well, I think there was a couple things. One was that it was told out of order. And then, the bad part of that is that then every movie wanted to be told out of order. But what no one realized is that Quentin told that movie in emotional order. It wasn't just thrown out of order for no good reason. And then I think every movie tried to do it. The other thing was they were all bad guys. Excuse me. In the 80s, bad guys were punished at the end of the movie. That was very important. The good guys won and the bad guys lost. That was the movies of the 80s. In the 90s, sometimes there's no good guys at all. I mean, every single person in Pulp Fiction is a bad guy. And we loved them.
It's funny, in Pulp Fiction, as you know, Bruce Willis, who's in the movie, wanted to play that Travolta character that you're seeing on screen. But Quentin said, read the script again and see if you can find a different role besides I've already got Travolta for that. You also point to Goodfellas. Goodfellas was another one of those movies I feel as though it's a cornerstone film generally. You point to it as an important movie to kind of kick off the decade.
Yeah, I mean, I was so excited when I stumbled upon this idea that I was going to get to open my book with Goodfellas. I already win in saying that it's, an incredible decade when you're starting with Goodfellas. You should be finishing with a movie like that. But that movie influenced so many other movies, and I didn't even realize how many until I was working on the book. I mean, Menace to Society mentions this film. Swingers mentioned this. And so many times it was The Long Shot is the scene that everyone wanted to do in their movies, which is the scene in Goodfellas where they come into the Copacabana through the restaurant and come up. And it's it's done in one take, and there's hundreds of extras, and there's gloriously no computers. It's real.
It's funny because that sort of long tracking shot, which, as you say, is choreographed so carefully, there's so much action going on. I've watched it so many times, just that one shot. It either was emulated or it itself was emulating other stuff. I mean, since then, I've become acutely aware of similar shots in other movies that go on for a long time with insanely complex choreography. Have you noticed the same thing? Or you must have, because that's your world.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I look for. And, the thing about the 90s is that all the movies were doing it. Like even Father of the Bride, which is like this romantic comedy, if you will. I just noticed in watching it the other day that there's this long scene with Steve Martin and Diane Keaton in the bedroom, and it was all one take, and she went in the bathroom and he went in the closet, and then they came on this side of the bed and they walked over here. Clint Eastwood does it in Unforgiven all the time. Now, when you go see a movie, it's edit, cut, make it quicker. But when you do a oneer, what happens to the viewer is you feel these are real people, because in real life, there are no cuts.
Oh, that's a great take. It's funny, you share something with Quentin Tarantino, don't you?
I certainly do.
You tell everybody what you share with Quentin Tarantino.
We both got our education at a video store. I was a video store clerk. I think actually the same years he was. Obviously, our paths went a little bit different. He might have been a little more successful than I was after the video store. I don't know.
Well, success is, one of those things. You don't know how you can define it.
I was working at a video store from 90 to 93. And I watched every movie. And that kept going through the 90s for me. By the end of the 90s, I started the 90s, I was in college. I ended the 90s, I had 2 kids, owned a house. So, I definitely changed. But in that stretch of the 90s, I watched just about every movie. And we didn't even have a computer. Quentin's store was a little bit better. We did everything by hand at Video Time in Little Massillon, Ohio.
You also talk about one of the things I really love is it's a reminder of all the kind of movies like, oh, yeah, right, of course. It's no wonder to think that these were all grouped together. A Pretty Woman, The Prince of Tides, The Shawshank Redemption. Speak to it, because that's a diverse group of movies right there, even just that handful.
Exactly. And that was my goal. I watched 160 movies, but I didn't pick my favorite movies. What I tried to do was pick a plethora of movies to show you that we had choices, we had variety. And, you single out Prince of Tides and Shawshank Redemption. On first blush, they're dramas. They're very dramatic films, but they also both have really funny scenes in them. You are going to laugh out loud and you're going to cry. That's something I miss from movies now. Now, if a movie's a drama, every single character in it is miserable. Nobody laughs and the whole thing is sad. That's not how life is. And in 90s, it was all about reflecting humanity.
So interesting that there's a lot here. How much of the book is film commentary, and how much of it is the film commentary / like fitting it into the decade of the 90s?
It's almost all film commentary. I really tried not to look at it as something of the past, because I think art lives. And I really talked about how you can see things even in today's society and how it foreshadowed where we were coming. A movie like Falling Down with Michael Douglas, if you watch that movie today, you will see that is the MAGA movement. It was all telling us there. If you watch a movie like Pretty Woman, the B story is about the rich wanting to get richer and buy companies and put people out of work. There are so many things in the 90s, in these films, that were warning us of what could come, because artists could say whatever they wanted. Clint Eastwood makes a movie about a town that the sheriff thinks no one should have guns. That's not what the movie's about, but that is a B plot. If you made that movie today, people would lose their mind. They'd be mad at Clint Eastwood, forgetting that this is a Western, and it was a way to keep guns out of the bad guy's hands to make Clint look even better. You know what I mean? They're just movies.
That's wild. I'd forgotten that plot point, Spike Lee was very active in the 90s in a transformative way, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he loved to push our buttons. That's one of the things that I talk about, is that Spike Lee making Malcolm X, which, Spike has made a ton of great movies, but to me, his magnum opus is Malcolm X. You really get angry when you watch it. You get uncomfortable. And they also show Malcolm X in an unpleasant light. For the first hour and a half, you see he's a petty criminal. Again, if you made that movie now, they'd say, oh, well, that means Spike Lee hates Malcolm X. No, you have to understand how he became this leader of American pop culture. He started out as a criminal, and they show his life very honestly. And Denzel is unbelievable in that movie.
Talk to me about another person in that class. I'm talking about vintage might be a better word. When I think of Spike Lee, I think of like a Paul Thomas Anderson, sort of the, Speak to me about, because he was also, I mean, he broke out during that decade.
Yeah, I mean, his more famous movie is it's funny that's called Boogie Nights, but I cover Magnolia because it came out in 1999, and I believe that's the movie I end the book with. And to me, it is the end of the 90s, and everything about the 90s lands in Magnolia. It's a personal story. It has movie stars. It does have some special effects. It's basically a 3-hour movie about cancer. I mean, hey, sign me up. Let's go out to the movie theater tonight. What do you want to do, honey? Watch a 3-hour movie about cancer? And they were allowed to do that. But I think after that, it started to come to an end. They pretty much told them no.
What was the status of comedy during that period? Comedy in the movies.
I mean, the thing that I talk about is that they're not dumb. And now a comedy has to be a dumb guy. And like a movie like Swingers is really funny. And Vince Vaughn's character cracks you up, but he's not like over the top. And I feel like comedy, you had Adam Sandler movies, you had Chris Farley and David Spade movies. And then, of course, you had Clueless and teenage movies as well that had a lot of comedy. But the characters you had some feel to them. You actually cared for them, and they were set in reality. Of course, all comedy is it's going to push the boundaries. But I think it all started with characters that you could believe in.
It's funny. Wes points out Austin Powers. Austin Powers also was a parody of other movies, which is kind of what, at its best, I thought it was doing, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely making fun of those 60s James Bond movies. And Austin Powers, we loved it, and it's one of the few things that spawned sequels. That was the other thing about the 90s, is they were unique ideas. They were not just sequel after sequel. In fact, I pick out 1994 as the best year. In the top 10 movies that year, there wasn't one film that was a sequel or a IP of any sort. There were 10 unique original ideas in the top 10 in 94. In 2022, all top 10 were sequels or IPs.
I was going to say you couldn't have it today. Run down a handful from that list of 1994, since that was to you sort of the,
Yeah,
it
I mean, it was Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
Reality Bites and Shawshank Redemption are the three movies that I cover for that, because I tried to only pick 2 or 3, and then in the back of the movie I do 55 more, and then it has my list of 160. But if you just take those 3, you've got Pulp Fiction, which was sort of a gangster movie, if you will, and then you've got Shawshank Redemption, which is this prison movie, and then Reality Bites was really the first movie that was made for people at my age. So for Gen X, it was the first Gen X movie. But we were too cool for school, so we didn't go see it, so they never made another one. But I did get to interview the writer of it for the book, and I think it's the centerpiece of the book is my interview with Helen Childress. It's the only movie she ever got to write, and she has no idea what it meant to Gen Xers. I mean, she thinks of the movie as a flop, and everyone I know has seen it. It had Winona Ryder, Ethan Hawke, and it was Ben Stiller's directorial debut.
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah. Well, it's so cool that you have taken that video store clerk knowledge, you continued to add to it, and you become this terrific tour through pop culture as defined by cinema. I think there's so much, cinema is such an exciting world. I mean, I know you feel this way, but I just want you to know I share that kind of love of cinema, although I think you're far more literate in the whole thing than am I. But I also think it is wild how it lands with us in such a powerful way. Like when you mention these titles, they evoke a certain feeling in me, like almost where I was in my life at the time I saw it. It's odd. It's almost like how music.
Movies that you really love that you love from this decade?
Of the ones that we've mentioned, I mean, all those Tarantino movies punched through for me. The Goodfellas to me was just brilliant. I mean, I just thought it, beginning, middle, end, and it took you on a journey, and you're in this place where you're rooting for somebody who's not a good guy, and yet you're hoping he doesn't get caught, because he feels like a better guy than some of the other guys.
Yeah, and one of the things that I talk about in reviewing that movie is how it sucks us in the beginning with only good things happening. So the first 53 minutes of that movie is a ride up the roller coaster, and you're just going up and up, and of course you know why Lorraine Bracco gets enamored with this guy. Like, I want to be a gangster too. Like, this is great. And then the last hour and 15 minutes of that movie is just the downfall, and it keeps getting lower. One thing that's funny is I have a friend who has a Gen Z boyfriend, and they watched Goodfellas, and their comment was, why would the gangster be mad at him when he told him to not sell drugs the second time? He just killed him. Why wouldn't he give him another chance? And it's like, because you only have one chance with a gangster. They're like, I didn't believe that part. He should have had two chances. Like, it shows you how we've changed.
It's so funny. Mark Thompson was in Air Force One in 1997. Yes, I was. I was also in Better Movie or Different Movie. Certainly, I had Better For Me. I had lines with Richard Dreyfuss in The American President, which was in the 90s.
And that was a great one. That is on my list in the back. I love Aaron Sorkin. Aaron Sorkin is such an amazing writer. So
yeah,
I love that you're in that.
I'm delighted that a piece of my significant body of work,
yeah, there we go,
could be celebrated. But the other, and then I've got to wrap. But also, The Shawshank Redemption. I just saw it again. It came on television, and I just can't turn it off. I mean, I just find it. And the other thing about Shawshank Redemption, I know we're late, but I just want to finish with Scott. I'm really excited about your book. Can't wait to get into it. Is that you're hoping for something? You're hoping for that happy ending. You're hoping for that Hollywood ending. You're hoping for something good to happen, and for these people who are so awful to be. And damn it, it pays it off. It really does pay it off in such a delicious way.
Yeah, and what I write about in that movie is how they pulled the trick on us, because most movies tip their hand, but when you are watching that film, you do not think it's going to have a happy ending, because so many horrible things have happened to him. And so I go through it, how that director, Frank Darabont, tricks us. And that's why that movie is so rewatchable, because it's not dumbed down. It's very smartly done. One of the best films ever.
Can I ask you, I don't know if this movie was in the 90s, though. I want to say it was not, in fact. It was Alien in the, no, it was 80s, huh?
Yeah, that's an 80s movie.
Yeah. God, I was just thinking of different movies. You've really got me thinking of all the movies that kind of were impactful, But this is, your point is, these aren't just movies that, you scooped out. This was a key decade in the evolution of cinema, is your point.
Right. Well, my real point is, if you put story on one side of a graph and you put technology on the other, the apex would be in the 90s. So there are good stories before and there are good stories after, and technology wasn't so good before, and of course it gets spectacular after, but does the story match? So it's not just willy-nilly. I lay out my thesis in the introduction.
Good. I do not like willy-nilly theses. I like well thought out and considered the theses.
I've had a couple people say your introduction was too long, but I was like, I didn't want to be misunderstood. So it is a 25-page introduction.
Well, you can pick up the book. Will you put up the picture of the book again, please, Tony? But you can get this book, The Last Decade of Cinema, Scott Ryan's latest on the cinema of the 90s. It's a nostalgic journey through the vibrant landscape of 1990s cinema, it says. And I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
You have a website, too. We'll link to it. If you're watching this video, there'll be a link to Scott's website. it's ScottRyanProductions.com, and I'm sure there's more information about Scott and his writing and this book as well. Hey, thanks for being here. Congratulations on the last decade of cinema. I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you, and I'm so glad you're excited by it. It makes me feel good.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. See you, Scott. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.